Some say the trouble's in the Pentagon. Some say the trouble's in the street. Some say the president's a paragon. Where's the trouble at the bottom? Some say the trouble's the anatomy. Some say the trouble's in the head. Some say the trouble's the psychology.
Welcome to Human Rights Here Now. Today's show is Human Rights at Work. I'm Nora Hochman. I'll be kind of talking with friends here who are going to introduce themselves. And if you would start us off, Casey, let us know who you are, and we'll get rolling.
I'm Casey Carlson. I'm a special education teacher in Santa Cruz City Schools at SoCal High School, and I'm also the secondary vice president for the Greater Santa Cruz Federation of Teachers. And my focus today is going to be talking about the corporate takeover of the K-12 system and how the unions are working together and with our community partners to try to fight back to keep public education accessible to all students.
And my name is Tobin Keller, Cabrillo College art instructor and co-chair of the art department. And I'm going to be talking about my involvement with our local union in regards to repeatability access and the limitations on classes for all students.
Great.
And I'm Allison Guevara, and I work with the University Council American Federation of Teachers. And I'm also a mom of 2 young children, which I think is important to mention because it's hard to juggle. And that kind of relates to my focus today, which is going to be about gender equity and work-family rights.
Great. And again, I'm Nora Hochman. I'm a union representative with the California Nurses Association. So with that, why don't we just kind of dive right in. We have a number of themes and, you know, certainly a lot of connection in the work we all do and the people that we do it with. So who would like to start us off? Casey,
I'll go ahead and start. I'll start. And I think one of the themes that we're all going to be looking at is that unions are under attack in the United States and throughout a lot of the world. And one of the reasons the main reason unions are under attack is because we're organized, and we're the only really solid, organized force to fight against the corporatization of public services, of healthcare in our country. And so I'm going to focus on the K-12 part, and Tobin's going to talk more about higher ed. And we see not just education, but quality public education as a human right. And I want to look at this a little bit at the national level, state level, and then locally, and just touch briefly on all those layers. At the national level, it's interesting that the Chicago teachers, you probably heard about the Chicago teachers strike, that they have been the foremost leaders in fighting back against the corporatization of public schools. And the reason that things really came to a head in Chicago is that Artie Duncan, who's now the Secretary of Education under President Obama, was their superintendent of public instruction. And if you think back to Chicago, Milton Friedman and the Chicago School of Economics, you know, their belief was this idea of shock doctrine and take advantage of any opportunity to bring in the corporate forces. So schools are struggling, schools are underfunded. What are we going to do? Are we going to fund schools? Are we going to bring in the resources? No, we're going to condemn schools, we're going to condemn teachers, we're going to blame it on the teachers' unions, and then we're going to come in, take over, and bring in charter schools.
Right, and in the case of Chicago, it also was sparked by a huge number of school closings, neighborhood schools that were shut down very quickly within something like 50 or 60
and that's
schools.
And that's how they do it, because if you condemn the schools and the teachers and you close the schools, then you say, well, what's the alternative? Oh, we have to bring in charter schools. And in fact, sadly, President Obama, who our unions supported, declared early on in his administration that he thought about 5,000 schools would have to be shut down and charters opened, you know, in their place. So what happens with charter schools? With charter schools, you start to get more segregation in your school districts because
racial segregation.
Racial segregation. You get segregation by disability because charters don't have to take all students. And then at first it was that there were public school charters, and then this whole idea of private school charters came about. And that's what's really happening now. And that's really frightening because the public school charters, at least there was some public input. They had some accountability to, if not a school district board, to a county board. But these private charters are not really accountable. And if we have no farther to look but in California right now, the race for the superintendent of public instruction between Tom Torlakson, who's a lifelong educator, teacher, and Marshall Tuck. Marshall Tuck was a software entrepreneur. He started the Green Dot Charter Schools in Los Angeles. He's financed in his campaign for superintendent of public instruction, never having been a teacher or educator, by none other than Michael Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York.
Who loved charter schools.
Right.
And
Eli Broad, Michelle Reed from Students First. And they have, a very strong corporate agenda. They want to shut down as many public schools in the form they are in now, bring in charters. They want teachers to be evaluated by test scores. They want data to be emphasized and test scores to be emphasized. And I think later on some of you guys are going to touch on that in other professions, that this is happening everywhere, where the data, rather than the quality of instruction or the quality of healthcare, it's the data that counts in every situation.
I would think worth mentioning, and we'll probably hear about this elsewhere, that at least in this case, these are the top 2 vote getters who go to the runoff in November, right?
Yes.
So between Torlakson, who's supported
Right.
by public school educators,
Right.
and Tuck, who is supported by, let's at least say, the corporate world,
Right,
right?
totally.
There's
Yeah.
a clear choice
Yeah.
for Californians there
Yeah.
to express themselves.
Absolutely, and Torlakson won with 49%, but with the new primary, they're both going to go into the primary in November. So that's at a state level.
The general. You mean into
In
the-
general,
yeah.
sorry, yeah. Locally, you guys have probably heard of Pacific Collegiate Charter School.
Sure.
It is a public charter, and it's become an accepted part of our community. And there is some public accountability, but the man who started that charter school, Reed Hastings, who's the Netflix of CEO and lives in Santa Cruz.
I didn't realize he started it.
Yes, he was the one who started it. He went on to be more involved in private charter schools, and one of the charter school companies that he's really involved in, he's on the board of directors, is called Rocket Ship Charter Schools, and that's a for-profit charter. They haven't come into Santa Cruz.
Is that over the hill?
That's interesting.
It's over the hill. So we have such a strong community in Santa Cruz, and the Santa Cruz community is so supportive of their public schools that we've sort of had a little like safety net or bubble here, which is great, and we want to keep that going, but it is coming closer. And our sisters and brothers in Morgan Hill, the Morgan Hill Federation of Teachers, just had to deal with Rocket Ship trying to come into Morgan Hill. And they united with the parents in Morgan Hill, the superintendent, the administration, everybody came together and were able to fight off rocket ship charters from coming into Morgan Hill. But the way our state law is set up, they can then go to the Santa Clara County Office of Ed and ask to have them approve having a rocket ship charter in Morgan Hill, even though the entire Morgan Hill community doesn't want them to
against
So
come.
they still have another chance.
So they have
to
another chance, and even if they didn't approve it, they can go to the State Board of Ed, and the State Board of Ed can approve it. So they have a lot of venues. So the way Rocket Ship, just to give you an example, Rocket Ship tells districts that it's going to save them money. The way they do that is they put children into these colorful little cubicles where they have computers. They have like 60 students in a room with an aide and not a teacher supervising. So of course it saves them money. But is that quality public education?
This is kind of the laptops for all approach to
Yes.
charter education.
Yes, and the interesting thing is when you look at the children of Reed Hastings or Michael Bloomberg or Eli Broad, they're not going to go to a school where they're going to sit in cubicles on a computer. They go to private schools that have very rich curriculums that are full of the arts
Breadth
and
and-
music
Breadth
and
and
that's
depth.
and so once again the children, the inner city kids or the kids who don't have other options are going to be funneled into those kind of schools.
Wow.
And one more thing about Reed Hastings that I have to mention is just this past spring in March, he spoke to the Charter School Association, and when I first heard this quote, I thought it was Saturday Night Live. He said, the problem with public schools are publicly elected, democratically elected school boards. That's the problem, and we have to get rid of that. And he said, once we go from 8%...
He didn't add unions to that?
Well, of course, yes, and then they don't want any union influence. So he wants private boards that are not elected, they're appointed. And his goal, he said, is that right now about 8% of the students in California are in charter schools, and he would like to have 90%. And I guess the other 10% are probably my special ed students that they don't want to have in their schools anyway.
It costs too much.
But that's, it seems like unreal that somebody would say that they didn't want to have a democratically elected school board, but that's how
That says a lot.
desperate they are, to take over. And one of the other ways they save money besides not behind, these cubicles and all that is that a charter school tends to pay teachers a lot less. So that in Ohio, which is a state which has been really taken over by charters, a public school teacher will make on average about $56,000. They're not going to get rich, but they can at least maybe support their family and have a house over.
And they have benefits and the things that help us survive.
Charter school teachers are making like $33,000. So what often happens, and this is the Teach for America model. Have you guys heard of Teach for America?
Yes.
So it's the idea that you get students right out of UC. They teach for 2 or 3 years. They're not going to make enough money teaching, but it looks good on their resume, and then you cycle them out, and you don't keep any teachers in the profession. Well, if any of you have been in schools or any kind of institution know, when you're new and young and you don't have permanent status or due process, you're not going to speak out.
Nope.
And so if you get rid of all the experienced teachers, who's going to speak out for the students and the families?
Right, and there's probably, all around this table, there's probably, deep links and connections between wages and benefits, right, and whatever the work is that we do.
Right.
But I have a feeling that's the least of it, right? What we're really talking about is, kind of what is the stuff, in this case, of public education that is of concern to, parents with kids who are in elementary school and who then go on to, higher education, right? So I think Tobin, you had a few things to say about that.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in on a few things, and first of all, talk about my very new involvement with our union, our local union, the Cabrillo College Federation of Teachers, and then the statewide union, the California Federation of Teachers. I just started with this year because of the changes the regulations on repeatability and student access to our classes. There's been a huge shift and a huge change, and there's been an enormous amount of work for mostly full-time faculty.
Excuse me for interrupting, but can you tell us specifically what repeatability means?
Repeatability in this case is once a student successfully passes the class and that's a C or better, that they cannot take that class again, they cannot repeat the class again. And California community colleges have had a history in allowing a student to repeat a course. There's a lot of reasons why a student would want to repeat a course, or why a faculty member would want a student to repeat a course, especially when you look in the fine arts area, and it's the fine arts that have really been impacted, as well as physical education. But I can go into those various reasons, but it's taking a course over again for greater saturation, greater understanding, and a greater outcome. Now, I understand the arguments against repeating a course, and there's faculty have made concerted efforts to increase the curriculum within an area because of these restrictions. We've rewritten dozens and dozens of new courses so that a student could continue studying within that area to get the depth and breadth that they need within the area.
But without appearing on paper to be doing
repeated
yes,
class repeated, because the basic argument is, why should our tax dollars subsidize a student repeating the same class if they've already successfully passed it?
Right.
And I understand that argument to a point, but if a faculty really thinks a student should repeat a course in order to achieve a higher level of accomplishment, let's just say portfolio development for transfer or audition for any performance class or physical education.
Or language proficiency.
Exactly.
Journalism.
Then why can't we establish that? So these regulations have made it really impossible for a student to achieve the goals that they need to achieve. And it has other greater consequences.
Right.
So my involvement with the union has actually helped a lot, so that I don't feel like I'm bashing my head against the wall, getting nowhere. And I was, our department is a sizable department at Cabrillo, and it's been whittled down
and
in
you're
terms
in the
of.
arts.
And we're in the art department, yeah. And we started out with, when I first started at Cabrillo, 10 full-time faculty. We're down to 3 full-time faculty and about 25 adjuncts, which goes now into this sort of corporate concept of limiting the full-timers, retiring them out, and using the part-time contract concept, so that, as we know, an adjunct, oftentimes they're called Rhodes Scholars.
Right,
or
freeway flyers.
Freeway flyers.
They work at multiple
and
colleges
I was
to
one
earn a
for
living.
10 years working at 3
Wow.
colleges, and it's exhausting, and you don't have time to get involved with the
And
politics.
you don't get any kinds of benefits.
Well, at Cabrillo you
benefits
do.
meaning-
It depends on the local. Yeah, benefits.
I see.
You can qualify, but it's varied. But the point is, it's an exhausting way of making a living.
Right.
So our
It's got to
adjuncts.
impact
They're not going to
delivery
help.
of education.
Yeah, and they're not going to help with the governance,
Right.
the stuff that the full-time faculty are charged with doing. And so you've got exhausted full-time faculty, you've got exhausted adjuncts that can't really contribute to the governance of the college. So the administration kind of pulls strings and makes things happen in various ways. So anyway.
But worth mentioning, or at least asking about, it sounds like, some of that sounds deliberate.
Yeah.
Not so much by Cabrillo individually, but
Right.
By the state.
community, by the state,
Right.
because there's huge cost savings involved.
of course.
And that means
Right.
taxpayers' dollars have been whittled down now, so
Well,
much that
It's true. I mean, the state is wanting to put in less tax dollars to education.
Right.
I understand with Prop 13, the state contributed additional funds to
yes.
keep public education system moving along, and then the state wants to pull back a little bit more from that, and that.
I don't
all
know if
the other
that's
arguments.
something worth understanding, though.
But it
Yeah,
seems like
but-
it's not just, I mean, it's definitely money, but it's not just money
It's
because
not.
the whole No Child Left Behind corporatization of
Right.
schools started in K-12, but it's definitely jumped the fence now
Right.
to community college
It
and higher
has, it
ed.
has jumped a fence in that we're creating specific programs that a student has to identify. They have to identify a major pretty much as they enter now.
In community college?
In community college.
And it certainly wasn't always
they're
that
going
way.
to be penalized if they don't in various ways. And the majors, we have an art studio major, but then we have a transfer major now. This is a brand new thing that's going into effect in the fall, that a student can opt into a Associates of Arts transfer major, which guarantees them admission to a California State University, not the one they want. If they want a specific one, they have to be very careful of what they do. But it's a limited amount of, it's 2 years, it's a specific 2-year program,
Right.
which is not the case of our students. Our students, on the average, are 3 to 4 years to get through, because Cabrillo, I mean, we know Santa Cruz County, a great place to live, is expensive, and full-time students are probably 25%
Right, and
of
it
our
costs
population.
a fair amount of money to go to a community
It
college.
does. So
now.
our students are working, if not full-time, they're working part-time, taking 9 units to 12 units max, and really piecing together their education.
Is
So-
there a connection there with something Casey was saying earlier about some racial, maybe class segregation?
Well,
in
it kind of
terms
gets, it's going to get down to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they
Yep.
want teachers at community college to be evaluated by data now as well, right? Aren't they
It's-
looking at how many
it's been- yeah.
how many of your students go on to
there
a
are model
four-year
programs,
college?
yeah.
And
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
they're-
And when you look at the number of transfer students from a community college, it's much smaller than you would think. But that's the focus. They're wanting to streamline, and as we say in one of our resolutions, ration education so that we get them through the system very fast. And this was happening because of the economic situation.
Well, that sounds frighteningly like rationing healthcare.
There are similarities, but Prop 30 actually relieved a lot of the impact on costs.
Right, when
And-
voters passed
yeah,
that bill to refund.
we thought, oh, good, we can breathe a little bit here. We don't have to cut courses, we don't have to let faculty go, we don't have to limit students' access to our classes. But no, because of this regulation that was passed by our Board of Governors, it's limiting the access, and it's having a big impact on
Wow,
us.
a lot of
especially the arts.
challenges there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that what we look at education as a way to help rebuild this economy, and it's interesting
Right.
that it's kind of having an opposite effect. Where you have a recession, and you're trying to speed people through the system, but what you're really doing is
Yep.
reducing access to education,
Right.
and that means reducing opportunities for people,
Right.
especially the non-traditional students who are maybe adults coming back to
Thank you
school.
for bringing that up. The lifelong learners, and then the other, the students that are lumped into that, those retraining.
Right,
Yeah.
right,
And those are people that you're I mean, that's
Well, I think we need to look at this as, when we talk about human rights, human rights has to do with equality, right? That everybody should have equal access to opportunities. And when you're reducing, access to education, that's really taking away one of those key avenues for people to advance in their lives. And I think that's, if you don't mind me jumping in now,
not
I
at
feel
all.
like that's a great
I'm glad you
segue.
did.
Because I think, so we know today women are 17% of members of U.S. Congress. That's, we're over 50% of the population, but we're only 17% of representatives.
We've come a long way.
Well, we get there.
Well, we have made progress, but we're only, women compose only 3.4% of CEOs. And women still earn 78 cents to the male dollar. And if you're a Latina, you're only earning 53 cents to the male dollar. So we still have some very persistent gender inequities in our society. And again, I think education is one of those ways that we can kind of help address that.
It's an equalizer. Yes.
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly.
But that's changing.
Yeah, but then there's the fact that women are actually 50% or 51% of college graduates.
Right.
So women are getting education,
Right.
but yet that's not changing the numbers at the top leadership positions. So what's going on here? And I mean, I think that this has to do with some real kind of long-standing structural problems and cultural problems.
Right.
But I think what I wanted to kind of share to help kind of raise awareness about this is that there's, I think, a growing movement around these issues. Even locally here, I think some of you guys know that there was this group that organized called Breaking the Glass Ballot. Just really looking at the fact that in our county we've never sent a woman to the California State Legislature.
That's true.
That we don't have that representation at the top levels of leadership.
Even though we consider ourselves very progressive.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's going on here? And so there are some great things happening. Some resources out there on the web that you can check out. One site is called Moms Rising. I love this website. It's kind of a blog type network site nationally, and it brings together moms and parents around all kinds of issues relating to working families. Including, and this kind of goes back to something that I wanted to bring in with what you were talking about, as access to public preschool, universal preschool. Obama has proposed that, and it would just be such a transformative thing for moms with young children to have that quality preschool to where they could actually, because right now, you could easily pay $1,000 a month to send your kid to preschool. But what if you're only making $14 an hour? How do you make that work?
And then you can't go to Cabrillo and take the classes you need. And our union, the California Federation of Teachers that you also work with, tried to get through a measure to establish universal pre-kindergarten, transitional kindergarten in the state. But Governor Brown doesn't want to release the funds to do that. He really wants to put a huge chunk of money in the rainy day fund. And our union is saying, yeah, we need a little money in the rainy day fund, but we worked hard for Prop 30, as you're saying, and now it's time to fund those programs.
And we know, there's so many studies that show this, that preschool is so important on so many levels. It prepares students for a lifetime. It helps our economy, our the criminal justice scene. When you give preschool to kids, they're on the right track. You're going to have less crimes committed. So I think that's a real important thing to be focusing on. People should check out Moms Rising and get involved with that online. Another really great kind of movement that's happening is the Restaurant Organizing Center, ROC United.
Right.
You've heard about this?
Yes.
So did you know that most women, their first job is in a restaurant?
No.
I had no
Mine
idea.
was.
Mine was
From the
too.
kitchen to the
I
restaurant.
wouldn't have called it a restaurant, but it was close. It was food service.
Yeah, so you have so many women starting off in the workforce, but anything happens in those restaurants. Managers do anything they want. There's a lot of sexual abuse. Women are paid horrible wages.
And the work is really brutal.
Right. So it was. If you go and check out ROC and kind of hear their materials, it's pretty amazing. And a lot of women and a lot of people, consumers, we all go to restaurants, right? Like we should pay closer attention to what's happening behind the kitchen doors. And I think that's actually the name of one of their movies or books is Behind the Kitchen Door. And then another one kind of bringing the policy in more is the National Partnerships for Women and Families. And they really have a lot of resources around some of the policy initiatives happening in DC and around the country. And one of those is really focusing on paid family leave, paid medical leave. There's a map, and hopefully that people can see that, this mapping paid maternity leave. And in Canada, how many weeks do you think you get off if you have a baby in Canada?
Weeks or months?
Weeks.
Don't you get 3 months?
You get 50 weeks in Canada,
Wow.
almost
Wow,
a
a
year.
My God, yay.
So if you have a baby, you could just spend a whole year bonding with your baby.
And what about the dad? Doesn't the dad get also
And this is
paternal
paid.
leave?
This is paid. Yeah, this is paid family leave. In Pakistan, 12 weeks of paid family leave. In the United States, on the federal level, nothing, zero.
right.
We have no paid family leave or medical
California
leave.
was kind of in the lead on that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think a lot of people realize that. You have to work really hard to do your research to find out about the benefits that are available to you. But it's true. The California, we passed a paid family leave program, paid family and medical leave. So if you have a baby or if you have a sick parent, you can apply for 6 weeks of paid family leave in addition to your disability insurance.
And that's over and above the family medical leave, which that's a federal.
So what the federal law, law provides is job protection.
Right.
But
Right to
in order
return.
to have paid leave, you have to apply it in the state of California.
Right.
And so, it's a huge benefit to people. I've taken it twice, and I think that was really instrumental for me to be able to bond with my babies, to establish breastfeeding. So that has, again, breastfeeding, just like a preschool. It's one of those things that has like so many
Predictors or-
benefits.
Right,
you
and
know?
worth saying, very specifically that we get what that did on kind of the parental side of the ledger, right? And then you return to work. So there's a benefit. Society
There is,
wins.
and they have studies
Society
that show
wins,
this,
yes.
that businesses are doing better, that California's economy is doing better because of this.
Yes.
Workers who can take this leave, and their employers, sort of support them in doing that, they feel more committed to their organization.
Sure.
Their morale goes up, their productivity goes up, and
the employer
organization
retains an experienced
Exactly.
employee. Yeah.
Yeah. So the paid family leave, medical leave statewide, if we all invested $1 a week, like a cup of coffee, okay, that would cover everybody in the country of 3 months of paid family insurance, so paid leave insurance.
And then we might be on the road to civilization.
So
as well.
it's like a Social Security type
Yes.
model system to provide for that leave.
You're
So I
right,
think we
but-
should really be looking at that as a country. California has led the way. I hope that we could keep that momentum going nationally. And then if people do need more information about taking a medical leave or a family leave, they can check out the California Work and Family Coalition. It's a great state coalition that's organizing around these things and has helped pass those measures here in California. And I think that what that really speaks to for me is this part of what we need to be doing as a labor movement, kind of tying back the union thing into it, is really expanding what we're doing beyond collective bargaining and talking about how we can come together as a community.
Well, that's
This
important,
isn't
yeah.
about
I
this isn't
agree.
about the union.
No.
This is about the families and the people
Right.
that go to work every day.
It's
They're-
kind of
they're-
bigger than the traditional bread and butter issues
Right.
that often
Right.
the workers that we
Right.
serve and work with
Right.
are accused, right, of the notion of being greedy. But really what we're talking about here is how much more expansive these issues are.
I want to jump in on
Sure.
that too, because
Okay,
with
good.
with California community colleges, the community is really slowly being eliminated from it, and they're trying to go. The state legislature and the board of governors is trying to slowly push it back to the junior college system. And we have this community of Santa Cruz County that's really invested in Cabrillo College. They're invested in school bonds, they're invested in taking classes, they're invested in relying on Cabrillo College as being open and accessible to them, but also their children, their grandchildren.
Right.
So, utilizing our community is really important because Cabrillo has been developed by our community. So I just had to interject that.
No, and I love that, and I think that that's where we all need to be coming together and talking about what kind of
Yes.
society do we want to live in, what are our values.
Right.
We don't have to assume this corporate agenda that they are
Right,
pushing
that's
on
right.
us.
Right.
We just need
Right.
to kind of reclaim that and
Right.
say that education matters,
Yeah.
our families matter, and we need to structure our society in a way that that
Reflects
embraces that.
That's
yeah.
right.
Right.
Well, worth mentioning, I mean, just to insert a little piece of the work that I do and the workers I do it with, but along these same lines, I think I work with the Nurses Union. And we are the California Nurses Union, but we are also a national union, doing lots of new organizing, lots of nurses groups organizing into the union, particularly on the eastern seaboard and a little bit in the south. But something that I think connects with lots of what we've talked about is the legislative action that our union is engaged in, which requires a lot more alliance work,
Yeah, it
a lot
does,
more
you're right.
coalition work. Right?
It does.
We get outside of ourselves
Right.
as our own union
Yeah,
and reach way outside, hopefully to the benefit of our entire country. So, for example, I mean, we can go from kind of little to large. We led the way with what patients, P-A-T-I-E-N-T-S, understood as, you know, a ratio where there are X number of patients to X number of nurses. And we're going to, in fact, see a video about that in a few minutes that kind of gets at the corporatization of that, to a current piece of legislation that we have now that is loosely termed the Robin Hood tax, because you know Robin Hood was right. And that tax seeks to extract a percentage of dollars on every stock trade that happens. So
Oh, I've
wrap
heard
your
about
mind
this, yes.
around how often stock is traded, that a percentage of that trade money would come out and be dedicated to health care.
Right. And that's
Not
what-
health insurance, health care.
Yes, that's a good thing.
Big
And
difference,
then there's
right?
another push for another. I think it's a state or it's a state bill or an assembly bill, oil extraction tax.
Yes, we've been talking about
Yes.
that oil fee
Yeah.
for a long time,
We're
particularly
the only country.
for higher
Yeah,
education.
we're the only country in the world that essentially doesn't have such a thing.
Well, and California is
State,
the only
yeah.
state in
State.
the country that
State in the
doesn't do
country.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if it's okay with all of
Yeah,
you,
show the video.
Since we're on
Yeah,
television,
yeah,
we'll
go ahead.
do a little television viewing. What we have is a video that kind of makes the connection between the very serious corporatization of health care, the effect of health insurance on health care, and it's a humorous look at a very painful subject, because it really impacts how it is that nurses are no longer being thought of as hands-on bedside workers, but people who basically run computers.
Computer operators, huh?
Exactly.
Which would be
in
like
order to
our
support the
online
billable
teachers,
hours.
which we didn't
Online,
even get to
exactly.
talk about,
And
but
moves.
And that's a
something
whole
they're
other
trying
threat.
to do.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a group-
So
yeah.
are we just about
Yeah.
ready to run that video now?
Good morning, Mr. Smith.
Here we go.
You ready to go home? We could sure use this bed.
It's Smith, and no, I'm not ready to be released. Where's my nurse? Are you a doctor?
No, I'm the hospital billing director.
Are we on?
But it definitely says Smythe on your
we pick our
pre-printed
nose yet?
invoice. Let's see, it's $42,908.
Aren't there any doctors or nurses around here?
Well, of course we have doctors, but they're all busy filling out their billable
Thank you.
hours. But we do allot our fine doctors
only a
3
3-minute
minutes
video.
and
Okay,
7
just so you
seconds
know.
with each
It's a-
patient every day.
Well, that's dumb. Where's my nurse?
Oh, we had to let most of our registered nurses go. Have to hit those profitability numbers. But I do want you to meet your new bedside caregiver, Frank.
Is that some kind of computer?
Frank is a computer, Mr. Smythe. His name stands for Formatted Recognition Analysis Non-Human Conclusion. Frank does an all-in-one assessment, diagnosis, and care plan for you. Our consultants say this kind of nurse works great.
This thing isn't a nurse. It's not even a human. And you can tell your consultants that conclusion does not begin with a K.
Hey, we don't name them. We just buy them. Frank will be assisted by one of our highly cost-effective computer technicians, Steve.
Hey, dude, how's it hanging? Hey, tell me what's hurting, and I'll program it into Frank.
This is stupid. I want a real nurse.
As recommended by our consultants, we have spent millions of dollars on the latest non-human medical technology.
My throat is burning up. I got terrible indigestion, acid reflux, whatever you want to call it. I got a pain in both my arms.
Whoa, dude, slow down so I can get all this grossness into Frank.
My heart is beating 1,000,000 miles a minute. Feels like it's going to jump right out of my chest.
Oh, cool.
See, he's printing out your home health care instructions.
Oh, Frank's checking out your medical records, man. Sorry about that leg amputation, man. Hey,
Diagnosis.
congratulations, dude. You're pregnant.
Frank system warning.
Uh-oh,
System error.
Frank's freaking out.
Nurse! Help! Nurse!
What is going on with Frank?
Dude, you got me, boss man.
my real nurse
Version
in here
52.1 of the manual is
Nurse,
still downloading on my
help.
iTab.
Feels like there's an elephant on my chest. Can't breathe. Do something.
Didn't we have those call button thingies? We get rid of those too.
No nurses, no buttons needed. But you should probably help this dude because he's turning purple.
Nurse!
Error.
Nurse!
I'm a registered nurse. What's going on here?
We don't know.
This man may be having a myocardial infarction.
Well, can you help? Do you know how to fix a computer?
No, but I do know how to take care of patients. Don't worry, you're in the care of a registered nurse now. We need an EKG stat.
Stat. What's that?
It means that you and your computer are in over your heads. Get a doctor and get out of my way. Move now.
Oh,
Time to
okay.
split,
I think
dude.
we need a doctor. Doctor?
So, you know, as I was saying, kind of a humorous look
Yeah.
at a really serious subject that we all have in common, right, is, you know, kind of the relationship of corporate, you know, real corporate dollar impacts and effects on students, on us as patients,
Right.
on us, you know, as union organizers. Obviously, we're managing these issues, but what are some of the other examples that we're facing right now in terms of how those corporations and, you know, kind of maybe legislators and maybe the general public, what do we need to be thinking about in terms of either how our money can work better for us or how we can continue to look for avenues of kind of resisting that? Are there things going on that we know about, maybe like the Robin Hood tax, or you know, areas where we can see people making a real difference in work, family balance stuff? There's good stuff going on out there too, right?
Yeah.
Some of it comes through unions, much of it.
Well, sure. I mean, you look at the history of public education in California. I mean, when the original Governor Brown started the original California mission, it was, you know, community colleges were free and open to all.
That's how
I mean,
it was when I went
pretty utopian concept
Santa Barbara
here.
City College,
I
yeah.
know. I mean, but they were kind of the junior college model, but at least, you know, the access was what was important.
Can I ask you, what's the difference when you say that between a junior college model and a community college?
Well, a junior college model is really meant as an easy transition from high school to a four-year college, so that it was really built upon more of a transfer
So it was based
model.
on the thinking, this is where you're landing for a couple of years,
Yeah.
and then, as I did, and
Yeah.
then moving on to a state or UC.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we moved away from that because we were offering a lot of other courses, and some of them are deemed enrichment courses, and that's they're sort of looked down upon. And you know, we were really looking at other kinds of students, especially those students that are not transferred. They're coming to community college to retrain or develop a new skill, and gain depth and breadth within that skill,
So that
especially the
community-
arts, for instance. You know, and Santa Cruz has this great arts community.
Right.
We pride ourselves on the arts community. We're fifth in the nation, according to Atlantic.com, in terms of artists per capita. That's below New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Santa Fe.
Yeah.
Santa Cruz County is fifth in the nation, so we really pride ourselves on the arts. So we have people coming to Cabrillo just to saturate themselves within the arts so that they can open up their own studio. You don't really need a degree to be an artist, but what you need is experience, depth, and saturation
So
within.
that community college model becomes learning for the sake of learning
Yes.
as its own thing to do.
And economically, it has its benefits. There's enough research to know that the arts do contribute back to the economic health of a community.
Right.
Totally.
So.
And
I wonder
Nora,
if,
one of the wonderful things that's come out of this crisis in public education is the increasing interface and solidarity between all of our levels
That's
of
true.
education. And when we used to really be, it was UC and Cabrillo
Right.
and K-12, and we knew each other high, but we didn't really work together and,
Right.
and talk to each other.
Right.
And we're all under attack. The same corporate agenda, you know, is coming down in higher ed now that came down in K-12. And we find these amazing similarities, and we've begun to work together in a way that's so positive.
Right.
And I had the joy of being invited to the Cabrillo College union meeting this last fall when we were in our contract campaign, and the Cabrillo College invited me to come speak. And I loved seeing all the professors from all the departments, and they started their union meeting by saying, talk about one success that you've had with your students this week. And every professor from every department talked about, oh, I had a student who, you know, has autism, and I helped her with my English course. And it blew away all my stereotypes of these higher ed people that I thought didn't really care. When my kids leave high school, I thought, oh, no one, you know, really thinks of them as individuals
They're coming
anymore.
into firm caring hands.
And it was wonderful. I went back to my high school and I told everyone, oh, those professors at Cabrillo, the teachers at Cabrillo, are just, they really care about kids, and this is so good, and we made the connections, and we're all working together, and you probably see I'm wearing this button that says we are all City College, and yesterday we had people from Cabrillo and K-12 up in Sacramento, and this says I am City College, because City College of San Francisco is sort of in the lead of being attacked at the community college level with the corporate agenda that's being put forth by the Accreditation Commission that right now has the contract to go into community colleges. And they want to close San Francisco City College down. 80,000 students go there, not based on anything to do with educational quality, but because San Francisco Community College stood up to this corporate agenda. They said, we don't want to end repeatability. We don't want to narrow our focus on our curriculum. We want our community college to continue to be a community college for lifelong learners.
They've been in that fight now for almost 3 years.
More, 4 or 5
more.
years.
But this huge momentum is built with, when we were up there yesterday, it was Chinese for Affirmative Action, there's community groups that are involved, K-12
Lots
is
of
involved.
coalition
So
work.
everybody has come together and is seeing the commonality just as we are today at this table in our
Very similar
struggles.
thing in healthcare where, over the last probably maybe almost 15 years now, certainly 12 or so, more and more we're seeing doctors organizing into unions.
Yes.
And at first it's kind of a surprising thing, right? They earn plenty of money. Depending on where they are in their careers, their working conditions are so bad that you don't really want to think about that as a patient. The level of exhaustion is frightening.
I can imagine,
Right? But so as doctors have unionized, it's begun to equalize the relationship between doctors and nurses, and that has hospitals kind of on the run a little bit. So when we look at our local hospitals, Dominican in particular, which is where I'm a union rep, we also represent workers at Watsonville Hospital, but Dominican is part of a chain of 13 or 14 Western regional hospitals called, ironically, Dignity. It's a corporation. 3 or 4 years ago, the Dominican Order of Sisters literally sold the hospital chain to a private company called Dignity. And there's nothing dignified about this corporation. You've probably seen on buses their whole human kindness. So they began launching that human kindness campaign, the company did, at the same time that the stationary engineers, Local 39, went on strike.
For a long time.
72-day strike last year. That strike was a very successful strike. We don't hear about strikes very much anymore. Chicago Teachers Union, certainly. And we may be hearing about them more in the future. But, that was a very long, very gutsy, and very victorious strike that really pushed that company back. So, I see it every day in my work, what it's like to battle a major corporation. But, I was also a union rep, as Allison knows. I was a Teamster union rep in the UC system, representing administrative workers there. And I can't really see the difference much between how UC treats its workers and students and how Dignity treats its nurses and patients.
But I think one of the takeaways, though, from this is that people can make a difference. I mean, I think it's so easy to feel like the corporate agenda is unstoppable.
Right.
But if you look at all these examples, like, we are making a difference.
That's right.
We may not be completely overturning the system like as we may have wanted, but
Not yet.
But we're kicking at the door.
and so I think it's important that we remember that we are players in the system, and we can make a difference. And kind of coming back to the work-family rights and kind of how to make your work more compatible with your family. You guys may have heard about the book Lean In, written by Sheryl Sandberg from Facebook. And it's a very compelling book. It's very interesting. I initially thought that I was going to be turned off by it because I knew that it was more about personal behaviors and decisions that hold women back from leadership positions, rather than like the policy or structural disadvantages that we face. But she has a lot of good points, and I think one of the takeaways is that there's a lot that we can do to bring ourselves to the table and to make a difference. And so, and I think locally we see that with a lot of companies here in terms of making work more compatible with families and more balanced. You know, we know that there's a lot of companies here who offer flexible work schedules, who do provide leave.
There's an award for it in a local paper. You know, the most family-friendly place to work.
And I love that. I love
part
that.
of the consciousness,
Yeah, and it's part of why I love to live in Santa Cruz, because I think a lot of people are here because they want to balance
They really care about the community. And at Cabrillo College, we started, it was a group of really concerned faculty, and I was one, that saw, you know, a deterioration of not just the arts, but a deterioration of education access at Cabrillo, and we got agitated, really agitated, and so it was the faculty that said, "Hey, we're gonna fight this repeatability regulation because it's not fair to our students, it's not fair, you know, to our programs," and that's why I got involved, and that's why Cabrillo actually initiated a resolution that went to the California Federation of Teachers Convention. We moved it through; it was adopted, and now we're in the process of getting other community college unions to adopt it, but also, more importantly, is the academic senates for each college. They need to adopt this, and then the state academic senate. It would be nice to have them adopt it, but the biggest voice, I always tell this every class, my students have the biggest voice. They're the ones that make the impact. So trying to pull them in.
And as they organize, either through student unions or whatever. I mean, that's kind of the common theme here, right? Is that how any given group either self-organizes or organizes through existing structures like labor unions.
Do I have time to bring in a local
group? Yeah, we've
group?
got about 10 minutes left. So.
Okay.
Oh, good.
So Allison got me thinking, because you're talking about people can make a difference, and I think I'd be really remiss if I didn't mention a local effort that's happening right now. And one of the parents from this group contacted me and said, you know, are you going to talk about this issue on the show? And right now, you know, we have a very supportive school community in Santa Cruz, and we don't have a lot of the issues that we've talked about today. But there's an interesting issue that came up, and I think it's almost inadvertent or accidental, but right now our district is considering reopening natural bridges. We had school closures a few years back when we had declining enrollment. Our enrollment's growing, and so there was a planning group, but it wasn't very open. These were parents and teachers were appointed. Not everybody was allowed access. And if you went to the planning meetings this year and you weren't on the planning group, you weren't allowed to speak. You could sit and observe. So parents felt like they really didn't have a voice in this whole decision about whether natural bridges would reopen or not. Well, it came to the board last month, the proposal to reopen natural bridges. And the way it would work, boundaries would shift, and natural bridges would end up being a segregated, mostly white school. Bayview, which is now a very nice, racially balanced school with different cultures and different races, would become a predominantly Latino school. And instead of, right now we have Westlake as sort of an almost all-white school. When the schools closed, and Galt becoming an all-Latino school, now we would increase that situation rather than decreasing the situation. And that decision was the train was out of the station, and it was really because of parents in our community who came together. The teachers had concerns, but we weren't really being listened to. And it was parents, mostly from Bayview School, but other schools as well, who started to come to board meetings. And I was just so moved by these parents. It was parents of color. It was a lot of parents, white parents, who said, we want our children to go to a racially diverse school. And if you go forward the way you are right now, reopening natural bridges without more input and thought, you're going to have segregated schools. We're also not sure if we have the money to do this right now and what impact this will have on the schools that are already open. So it was amazing, within a few months' time, this parent group with no, organizing experience coming together because of their concerns and saying, let's wait, let's look at this issue again. So I'm really glad you brought that up, because people do feel disempowered, but you see examples where parents and community people can make that difference.
They do,
I really think it's worth mentioning, especially for the viewing audience, again, that the four of us are union activists. Some of it as a matter of how we make our living, some of it is our activism in the course of our work, right?
Right.
So, the least of our conversation here, it's unusual. The the least of our conversation has kind of been the ABCs of unions, what
Right.
most people would expect 4 trade unionists sitting around talking.
Right.
You know, the highlight for me listening to all of you is that the organizations that get built, sometimes and often with unions in the lead, which means that there are people who have been handed opportunities for leadership. That's especially important for women who are often kind of shut out of those opportunities. But unions often become kind of the training grounds for how communities learn to self-organize, form coalitions and alliances, and then go solve whatever problems need to happen.
Yeah. That certainly is my case. I mean, our union has been there. We've had a fairly strong union, and we have a great director. Maya Benatov is the most amazing director of our union, and she just provided the information and support right away. She was right there. She was probably a little ahead of us, and she was right there when we, our faculty, not fully engaged in the union, were worried about the regulations. So again, it gave me the resource and the avenue to feel like I could move forward and make a little difference.
Right, there was something you could be a part of
I made a
to
huge
spread those
difference.
wings.
I was not an activist. I was an art teacher, and in my little environment, and trying to keep a department together that was slowly being diminished, and so it made a big difference.
So in your case, kind of working through, being I imagine an artist and an art teacher as well, finding a way to save that resource by using your union
to help.
When we say our community wins, that means any student coming along who wants to study art, whether they repeat the class or not, it's there for them, right?
That's my
I'm sure
goal.
we all have.
Yeah,
no, and it's like it's not waiting for an invitation to the table.
He can't wait.
It's owning that.
Or putting the table in front of other people and saying, now we're all at the table.
Come to it,
Yes, exactly.
I love it, and I think that it does sometimes feel like work, or you feel that tension that comes with going up against somebody in a position of power.
Right.
But we all know from our experience that this is how you form relationships. This is how you build a sense of community. I mean, life becomes so much richer when you do take part in this.
Right.
Last year, just to piggyback on that, the life becoming richer and how we form those relationships. Last year, when I was in between jobs, I walked that stationary engineers picket line pretty frequently during the week, right?
Yeah.
I really enjoyed myself. I learned a lot about the work that those mechanics and engineers do at a hospital. I had no idea of how highly skilled that work was and how complex it was. And so being with them for all that time, and then, a few months later, going to work for the nurses union, the very first person I saw when I went into the building to Dominican for my first day at work, just walking through, was one of those guys that I had been on the picket line with.
And you had that connection.
And we had an immediate connection. We had been with each other. It was the best way to get welcomed because I didn't know anybody else.
Right.
I was just there to start finding my way through that building. And that was who was able to take me around, show me, kind of basic setups with a high degree of kind of knowingness of each other. Well, that all came through union, right? Just regular, kind of behavior between two people. So that building of relationships that leads to, a pretty high level of trust that then forms the basis of coalition and alliance work that then says we're dragging everybody to the table. This is something we have to do.
And I think we care more when we know people.
Yes.
So when we form those relationships, I think we do, and I think it's just you quickly find out all the connections that you have and how your teacher here is your patient there, and your neighbor here. So
and I hope everyone watching this sees that we're the face of unions. There's that stereotype.
Well,
None
we
of
don't
us
smoke cigars.
We're not smoking cigars. We have
I love cigars. I don't even drink bourbon.
So we are the unions of today.
So we have just a few minutes left, right? So maybe we could go around again and highlights of what we would like viewers to really take away from this.
That sounds good.
Yeah. Want to lead us off, Casey?
We're all looking at
it. What I'd like viewers to take away from this is to be involved, as Allison was saying. Be involved. Talk to your teachers. Talk to your nurses. care enough to find out what's going on in your community, and don't walk away, close your ears and eyes to what's going on, and feel disempowered. Like this last election that just happened, the voter turnout was so low.
Yeah.
But we need to be involved and care about our communities, and I think unions are leading the way in making those connections. So come with us, listen to us when we come around to your neighborhoods and talk to our communities.
And I would agree. You want to be involved. I think you have to be, because your voice, especially at the community college level, is really important. And as community member, what we're doing is we are working at putting pressure on state legislators to pressure the Board of Governors to change these regulations, because it wasn't legislated, it was just written in. It could have been legislated, but the state academic senate took it on to write it into Title V anyway. What anyone can do is they can go to our union website, which is ccft@cabrillo, or at ccft@ccftcabrillo.org.
There you go.
Okay. And we have a petition online.
that's
Lots
great.
of information about what we're doing. We're at the state level now, and it's really exciting. And I'm in my studio less making art, but I love what I'm doing.
That's great.
Great.
It's good to have you.
Well, I would just say that we've talked about diversity tonight, and we know that diversity brings value to organizations, that we will have greater insight and long-term vision about what we need to do in our organizations. And I think that we know that we're not at where we need to be. We need more women involved. We need more people of color involved at leadership levels. And we can all do a lot to make that happen, both on a personal level, husbands supporting their wives more with housework and childcare duties or whatever, coming together as a community, but also at the policy level. Like, look, we need a national paid family leave act. We need universal preschool. We need to make these happen, and I'd like to see our local leadership, our government representatives, make these policies their own too.
That's great. So I'll just finish by saying very quickly, the California Nurses Association continues to fight on for single-payer health care. I hope people will be looking for that. This has been a wonderful conversation. I've learned a lot from all of you. And this has been Human Rights Here Now. This has been Human Rights at Work. And maybe sometime we'll do this again.
Wonderful.
Okay,
I like the
thanks,
idea.
Nora, for moderating.
Thanks.
Good conversation. Thank you all.
It was. Great.
Thanks.
Some say the trouble's in the Pentagon. Some say the trouble's in the street. Some say the president's a paragon. Where's the trouble at the bottom? Some say the trouble's the anatomy. Some say the trouble's in the head. Some say the trouble's the psychology. Where's the trouble at the bottom? Trouble, trouble, where's the trouble? Oh mama, where's the trouble? Got a headache, seeing double. Where's the trouble at the bottom? Trouble, trouble, where's the trouble? Oh mama, where's the trouble? Got a headache, seeing double. Where's the trouble at the bottom? Some say the trouble's with the principal. Some say the trouble's with the kids. Some say the trouble's the curriculum. Where's the trouble at the bottom? Some say the trouble's in the textbook. Some say the trouble's in the class. Overall, the school board fugging up. Where's the trouble at the bottom? Trouble, trouble, where's the trouble? Oh mama, where's the trouble? Got a headache, seeing double. Where's the trouble at the bottom? Trouble, trouble, where's the trouble?